Have you ever wondered why certain moments in your life feel strangely familiar, as though you are walking through scenes that have already been written? You tell yourself you're making choices, yet you keep arriving at the same emotional destinations, the same disappointments, the same fears, the same invisible walls. Perhaps the life you believe you're living is only the surface of something much older. Every day, your conscious mind narrates a story about who you are. It tells you why you speak the way you do, why you fall in love with certain people, why some opportunities excite you while others terrify you. It feels convincing because it is the only voice you hear clearly, but beneath that voice, another life is unfolding. It doesn't announce itself with words. It reveals itself through quiet impulses, recurring dreams, unexplained anxieties, sudden attractions, and decisions that seem to make themselves before you've even had time to think. It is silent, patient, and astonishingly influential. Most people spend their entire lives believing they are the author of their thoughts. Yet what if consciousness is only the final page of a much longer story, one that began long before you became aware of yourself? This unseen current shapes your relationships, your ambitions, your fears, and even the identity you defend so fiercely. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply continues its work in the background, unnoticed. The greatest mystery is not what exists in the world around you. It is the invisible life unfolding within you every single day. And once you begin to notice it, the familiar version of yourself may never feel quite as solid again. The question is not whether this hidden life exists, but why you've spent so long unable to see it. There is a peculiar kind of prison that has no walls, no locks, and no visible guards. You can build a career inside it, fall in love inside it, even grow old inside it, without ever realizing you were confined. The prison is not your circumstances. It is the version of yourself you mistake for your whole identity. From childhood, you begin collecting descriptions. You are told you are quiet or difficult, gifted or ordinary, responsible or emotional. At first, these are only words spoken by others. Over time, they harden into beliefs. Those beliefs become habits. The habits become a personality you learn to protect, as if it were your true self. Eventually, you stop asking, "Who am I?" and begin asking only, "How do I remain the person I already believe myself to be?" This is where the invisible life begins to tighten its grip. You reject opportunities because they don't match the story you've accepted about yourself. You avoid conversations that might challenge your identity. You repeat familiar relationships, not because they bring peace, but because they feel strangely recognizable. Even your suffering can become a place that feels safer than the uncertainty of change. The most convincing illusions are not the ones imposed from the outside. They are the ones repeated so often within that they become indistinguishable from truth. And so, without noticing, you begin living from memory instead of possibility. The past quietly disguises itself as your personality, while the deeper parts of your mind wait in silence, hoping to be acknowledged. But if this invisible prison isn't built by the world around you, then who or what placed you inside it in the first place? If this invisible prison shapes so much of your life, why do so few people ever recognize it? Because the mind has one task. It performs with remarkable devotion, preserving continuity. It would rather protect a familiar identity than risk discovering a deeper one. Even when that identity causes pain, it offers something the unknown cannot: certainty. Imagine standing before a door that has always been locked. Behind it may be freedom, wisdom, or a version of yourself you have never met. Yet opening that door would also mean questioning everything you have believed about who you are. For many, that uncertainty feels more threatening than remaining confined. This is why people defend habits that quietly diminish them. They explain away recurring disappointments. They blame circumstance, timing, or other people, while overlooking the hidden patterns that repeat beneath every chapter of their lives. The unconscious rarely announces itself with dramatic revelations. Instead, it whispers through subtle discomfort, a relationship that feels strangely familiar, an irrational fear that appears without warning, a dream that refuses to fade, or a persistent feeling that something essential is missing despite outward success. Most people silence these whispers. They distract themselves with endless noise, constant productivity, and the comforting rhythm of routine. Modern life makes this easier than ever. Every notification, every endless scroll, every moment filled to avoid stillness becomes another layer separating you from the deeper conversation taking place within. Silence, after all, is dangerous, not because it harms you, but because it reveals what distraction has been hiding. The invisible life remains unseen, not because it is hidden too well, but because seeing it demands a rare kind of courage. The willingness to let your certainty dissolve before a truer self has taken shape. And this is precisely where Carl Jung believed the real journey of the human mind begins. Not with finding new answers, but with questioning the person asking the questions. Carl Jung believed that the greatest forces shaping your life are often the ones your conscious mind never notices. He did not see the unconscious as a dark vault filled only with buried memories or hidden fears. He saw it as a living landscape, vast, intelligent, and constantly communicating through symbols, emotions, dreams, and patterns. According to Jung, what you call I is only a small island rising above an immeasurable ocean. The ego believes it is the captain of the ship, carefully steering every decision. But beneath the surface, unseen currents are already determining the direction long before the captain realizes the course has changed. This is why you sometimes meet a stranger who feels instantly familiar, or recoil from someone you barely know without understanding why. Why certain dreams linger for years while ordinary memories disappear within days. Why the same emotional lesson returns wearing different faces, as though life refuses to move forward until something unseen has been understood. To Jung, these were not random events. They were messages, not from some mystical force outside you, but from the deeper architecture of your own psyche, a part of you that remembers what your conscious identity has forgotten. He warned that the greatest danger is not having an unconscious. Everyone has one. The danger is believing you don't, because when unconscious forces remain unseen, they quietly disguise themselves as choices, preferences, opinions, and even destiny. You begin to think, this is simply who I am, when in reality, you may only be acting out a script that was written long before you ever questioned it. Jung expressed this truth with remarkable clarity. Until the unconscious becomes conscious, it directs your life, and you call it fate. That single idea changes everything, because if what feels like fate is actually an unseen pattern within your own mind, then the life you've accepted may not be fixed at all. But recognizing the pattern is only the beginning, because the moment you see it, another part of you begins to resist. The moment you begin to recognize the invisible patterns shaping your life, something unexpected happens. You do not immediately feel free. You feel divided. One part of you longs to understand. It quietly senses that beneath your familiar identity lies a deeper, more authentic self. It is drawn toward truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. Another part resists with equal determination. It whispers, "Don't question this. You've survived this long. Why risk everything now?" This conflict rarely appears as dramatic fear. More often, it disguises itself as hesitation. You postpone difficult conversations. You dismiss unsettling dreams. You return to relationships that have already revealed their ending. You cling to routines that no longer nourish you, not because they bring happiness, but because they preserve the version of yourself you've always known. Jung understood this tension as a necessary stage of psychological development. The psyche is not eager to abandon old structures. Every belief, every emotional defense, every carefully constructed identity once served a purpose. They protected you when you lacked the strength to face certain realities. but protection, can quietly become imprisonment. The walls that once kept pain out may eventually prevent growth from entering. This is why transformation feels less like gaining something new and more like losing something familiar. You are not simply changing your behavior. You are watching an old identity begin to loosen its grip, and that can feel strangely like grief. The greatest battles are rarely fought in the outside world. They unfold in silence, where no one else can witness the quiet argument between who you have always believed yourself to be and who you might become if you stopped defending that story. Most people mistake this discomfort for a sign to turn back, but Jung believed it was something else entirely. The first sign that the shadow had begun to move. You do not meet your shadow in a quiet moment of understanding. You meet it in the moments that seem to happen to you. It appears when someone's success fills you with resentment you cannot explain, when a harmless comment lingers in your mind for days, when you fall instantly in love with someone you've barely met, or reject them before they've spoken more than a few words. These reactions often feel spontaneous, as though the world has disturbed your peace. But Jung asked a different question. What if the disturbance did not begin in the world at all? The shadow is not simply the darker side of your personality. It is the collection of qualities, emotions, desires, fears, and potentials that your conscious identity refused to claim. Some were rejected because they frightened you, others because they were judged unacceptable, and surprisingly, many were abandoned because they were too powerful to fit the image you learned to present. You may hide your anger until it becomes bitterness, hide your vulnerability until it becomes isolation, hide your ambition until it transforms into quiet envy. Even your compassion, creativity, courage, or capacity to lead can be pushed into the shadow if you once believed those qualities would make you unacceptable. The shadow does not disappear because you ignore it. It waits, and when it cannot be expressed directly, it finds another path. It slips into your dreams wearing unfamiliar faces. It disguises itself as irrational fear. It emerges through emotional overreactions that seem out of proportion to the moment. Most often, it reveals itself through projection, when you become intensely disturbed by qualities in others that exist unnoticed within yourself. This is why certain people seem to carry an unusual emotional weight. They are not merely reflecting who they are reflecting parts of you that your conscious mind has never welcomed. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the silent messenger standing at the edge of your awareness, patiently holding everything you left behind. The longer you refuse to meet it, the louder its language becomes, and eventually, life presents a moment when ignoring the shadow is no longer possible, because what remains hidden begins to shape every relationship, every choice, and every future you imagine. There comes a moment in many lives that cannot be explained by logic alone. It may arrive after a relationship ends without warning, after a career you've built for years suddenly feels empty, after the loss of someone who once gave your identity its shape. Or perhaps it appears in a quiet evening when nothing is outwardly wrong, yet an undeniable feeling rises within you. I can't keep living like this. Most people interpret this moment as failure. Jung saw it differently. He believed these psychological fractures are often the beginning of a deeper transformation. When the identity you've depended on begins to crack, it is not necessarily because your life is falling apart. It may be because the life you've been protecting can no longer contain the person you are becoming. This is why periods of confusion often feel so disorienting. The old story is losing its authority, but the new one has not yet revealed itself. You stand between two versions of yourself, unable to return to who you were, yet unable to fully understand who you are becoming. It is a lonely place. Friends may offer advice that no longer fits. Family may encourage you to get back to normal, unaware that the normal you are searching for has quietly disappeared. Even your own thoughts begin to contradict one another. One day you feel certain, the next Everything feels uncertain again, yet beneath the confusion, something extraordinary is happening. For the first time, you stop reacting automatically to life. You begin observing your own patterns instead of becoming them. A painful conversation becomes a mirror instead of a battle. A recurring fear becomes a question instead of a command. A dream becomes a message rather than meaningless noise. The invisible life has not vanished, but now you are beginning to notice its movements. And in that quiet act of observation, a new kind of freedom begins, not the freedom of having all the answers, but the freedom of no longer being completely controlled by what you cannot see. The question now is no longer whether the unconscious shapes your life, but what happens when you finally choose to listen to it. Imagine a man who has spent his entire life being admired for his calmness. His colleagues describe him as composed. His friends say he never loses control. His family depends on him because he is always reasonable, always patient, always the one who keeps the peace. He believes this is simply his nature, but over the years, something quietly changes. He begins to feel exhausted after every conversation. Small inconveniences provoke silent frustration. He avoids conflict at any cost, yet secretly resents those who speak their minds. Whenever he meets someone confident and unapologetically direct, he dismisses them as arrogant, selfish, or dangerous. He has no idea that what disturbs him is not the other person's confidence, it is his own. Long ago, perhaps as a child, he learned that expressing anger or standing up for himself led to rejection. To protect himself, he buried those qualities beneath the image of the good and agreeable person. The mask earned him acceptance, but it demanded a quiet sacrifice. Each year, more of his authentic self disappeared behind the role he believed he had to play. Then one evening, after another day of smiling through emotions he never expressed, he catches his reflection in a dark window. For a brief moment, he does not recognize the man looking back, not because his face has changed, but because he realizes he has spent years performing a version of himself that no longer feels alive. Nothing dramatic happens. There is no revelation, no voice from the heavens, no sudden certainty, only a quiet question that refuses to leave him. If this isn't who I truly am, then who have I been living for? That question becomes more powerful than every answer he has collected throughout his life, because the unconscious rarely transforms you through extraordinary events. It changes you through one honest moment that makes pretending impossible. And once that question has been asked with complete sincerity, there is no returning to the comfort of unconscious living. Only a deeper journey remains. By now you may be wondering whether the goal is to eliminate the invisible life entirely. Jung would have answered with a quiet no. The unconscious is not a flaw to be repaired. It is not an enemy waiting to be conquered. It is the deepest foundation of your psychological existence. Without it, there would be no imagination, no intuition, no creativity, no symbols, no dreams, and perhaps no meaningful transformation at all. The true struggle is not between good and evil. It is between awareness and unconsciousness. Every day, two forces shape your life. One seeks comfort in certainty. It clings to familiar identities, predictable emotions, and well-worn stories. It whispers, stay as you are. At least you know this version of yourself. The other speaks more quietly. It does not shout. It does not demand. It simply invites. It asks you to look at the emotion you would rather avoid, to question the belief you have never examined, to remain present when your instinct is to escape. It asks for something far more difficult than confidence. It asks for honesty. This is the battle that almost no one else can see. The world may celebrate your achievements while remaining completely unaware of the silent negotiations taking place within you. Outwardly, your life can appear successful. Inwardly, your psyche may still be waiting for permission to become whole. Jung called this lifelong movement individuation, not the creation of a new personality, but the gradual reconciliation of the many forgotten parts of yourself. It is the patient work of allowing the conscious and the unconscious to enter into dialogue rather than conflict. Wholeness, then, is not perfection. It is the courage to stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable pieces, to recognize that your fear and your strength, your tenderness and your anger, your certainty and your doubt, all belong to the same human story. When these fragments begin to recognize one another, something remarkable happens. The invisible life does not disappear. It begins to speak with you instead of speaking for you. And in that quiet conversation, you discover that the person you have been searching for was never somewhere ahead of you, but waiting beneath everything you thought you had to be. Nothing changes overnight. The unconscious does not surrender its mysteries because you watched a single documentary or read a single book. It reveals itself gradually, with the patience of nature. One conversation, one dream, one unexpected emotion at a time. But something subtle begins to shift. You pause before reacting. You become curious about your anger instead of obeying it. You notice that your strongest judgments often point toward unexplored parts of yourself. The same events still happen, but they no longer carry the same invisible authority over your life. This is not because the world has become easier. It is because you are no longer living entirely from the surface of your mind. You begin to understand that freedom is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to recognize fear without allowing it to write your identity. You discover that certainty is not the highest form of wisdom. Awareness is. Perhaps this is what so many people spend their lives searching for without ever finding. Not happiness, not perfection, but the quiet relief of becoming real. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That journey is not about creating a better mask. It is about slowly removing the ones that no longer belong to you.